I'm Mark Bouris and this is Straight Talk. Matt Reilly, welcome to Straight Talk, mate.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
And where are you now, right now? Which part of the world are you right now?
I'm in Los Angeles. I'm in the little office. I have a little cottage attached to my house, which is filled with all of my movie paraphernalia and my books. So I'm in LA.
I'd love to have a look around that room. I just would love to have a look around that room. I hear you got some cool stuff. Someone told me that you got a DeLorean car. Like, is that real?
I do.
Serious?
It's actually in Canberra in my friend's garage. I foolishly got it converted to, actually it wasn't foolish. I got it converted to right-hand drive and then I had it for years and then I moved to America. So my buddy in Canberra is trying to put an electric engine in it, which is awesome.
Wow.
And yeah, I've got stuff behind me like little Die Hard Tower and Guardians of the Galaxy and the time I was at Comic-Con. It's movie posters all around here. You got to inspire yourself.
Are you living the dream? I mean, do you reckon you're living your dream now? You look like you are, just the way you're coming across.
Yeah. This is sort of what I hoped for. I write my books, and this year I've now directed a movie. I'm surrounded by creativity. And literally just in the last couple of days, I got back to work on a new book. So I still enjoy writing the books, and yet this year has just been a roller coaster ride with the movie Interceptor. So yeah, I feel I'm living the dream. Yeah.
And I mean, I have to be honest here. Like all the production crew around here, one guy got a boner when knowing that you're going to come on. Like it's pretty serious shit. Like they're all really excited. Like he started telling me a little bit about your Netflix show, which we're going to talk about in a moment, Interceptor. He sort of started telling me he just couldn't keep the smile off his face. Like it was mental. He was really smiling. He was exploding, but at the same time restraining from letting me see how much he was exploding about explaining what you're doing. So, okay, let's just talk a little bit about you because it's I don't know if it's normal. Is it that Australian authors like you end up in Hollywood, effectively, where you are now? You're not in Hollywood, you're in LA, but you're probably close to Hollywood. And as you say, living the dream, but getting accepted by all the studios over there to produce or rather direct a series or a show or a movie.
Yeah, directing a feature film, yeah. As Denzel Washington recently said, though, he said, Hollywood is a street. Los Angeles is the movie town. It is unusual. And in fact, it's been unusual since my first couple of books, Contest and Ice Station. I remember when Ice Station came out in 1998, and one of the reviews said, this is unlike any modern Australian novel. And the reason is I write action. I write bonkers, out-of-control action stories. And Australian fiction, for whatever reason, has gone down a certain path. And here I came like a bulldozer out of nowhere, charging in with this. I mean, Contest was self-published, but Ice Station was this, it was a real quantum leap up from what I did in Contest. And Ice Station was just this out-of-control action story. And it was the book that catapulted me around the world. And it went to the US, the UK, and Germany very quickly. And I sold the movie rights to Paramount Pictures as soon as, 2001. They never made it. But I was knocking on the door of Hollywood 20 years ago, and I've had a lot of false starts, and Interceptor now is the first one to actually get made, and it's the one where I'm directing.
When you say Ice Station was out of control, I mean, that's what indicates to me your brain is pinging. What do you mean? Tell me what you mean by out of control. You mean like so fanciful?
Hectic and pace. My books, when you start writing, you look at the books you're reading and you say, there's something more that I want. I can do better than that. And I was reading Michael Crichton and Tom Clancy and a bit of Jeffrey Archer and John Grisham. And I loved the international stakes of Clancy, but it was too slow. But I loved the pace of Crichton. Crichton's books had, Jurassic Park, Rising Sun, The Great Train Robbery, even The Andromeda Strain were fast. And I thought, what if you wrote a book which had the geopolitics of Clancy and the pace of Crichton? And that's essentially what iStation is. And I made that pace relentless. So when I say out of control, I'm talking like a roller coaster on paper. And that's, if people talk about a Matthew Reilly story, I hope that's what they think.
Is that in the language or in the imagination? What is it? What is pace?
That's a good question. It's in the language and the structure. You take your character, you put them in a frying pan, and they jump out of that frying pan into another frying pan. And then there's another frying pan and another one. And if you have a rolling sequence of dilemmas, you get pace. And the reader always has to have a chance to figure it out. And so as things occur, you've layered in little clues earlier on. And so it should feel to the reader like the most natural progression, and yet it should be moving at bullet speed. And if I tell people, you should know the flavor of a book from the first page. I can still remember the first page of John Grisham's The Firm, which I think is still his best book. And the first line is something like, the managing partner of the firm looked at the CV of Mitch McDeere and once again found nothing that he didn't like. He was eager, he was hungry, he'd graduated first in his class. This is the first page of the book telling you about the hero, and you've got this dark-suited guy in a law firm reading his CV and going, this is exactly the kind of kid I want. You're interested. What happens next? And, first line of my book, iStation, is, it had been 3 hours since they lost contact with the two divers. Boom. You're in Antarctica. Two divers. They've lost contact with them. What happens next? As long as the reader is asking what happens next, you've got pace.
Is it about just making an assumption or a presumption? Is there a presumption that exists that the reader, by definition, because they read novels, etc., and fiction, by definition, have an imagination, and that they can ping off into various directions and tangents about what the hell's going on here? Like, for example, that John Grisham, The Firm, that opening salvo about this particular individual who's dark-suited going to join this law firm. And by the way, I remember I was working in a law firm when that book came out, and I was just a young fella, and I remember it quite well. And my imagination went a bit wild because the firm I worked for had a lot of, I wouldn't say dodgy, but unusual characters as clients. Yeah. And I always sort of imagined myself in that same position when I read that book. So do you make a presumption that, not as to the intellect, but as to the sort of plasticity of everyone's imagination?
Yes. And I should say I did a law degree too. I did those interviews at law firms and worked for a very short time in a big city, Sydney law firm, Cause Chambers Westgarth. The audience, this is a very interesting question. The audience that buys a book with the name Matthew Reilly on it, now 23 years in, they know the story to expect, something fast and big and high stakes. What I pride myself on is keeping up with the audience. The audience that bought iStation back in 1998, now in 2021, has watched all manner of new movies. They've gone through this golden age of television. They are more sophisticated than they've ever been. I tell people that my books are a little shorter than they used to be, but they've got more in them because the audience demands that. And so, yes, you are acknowledging that the audience is a sophisticated story participant. Since 1998, we've had what? The Lord of the Rings movies. The audience has seen giant battle scenes. Remember those first Lord of the Rings battle scenes at Helm's Deep and Minas Tirith and, hundreds of thousands of orcs laying siege. We'd never seen that sort of thing before. Likewise, we've now had Game of Thrones, 20-plus Marvel movies. And what I love about the Marvel movies, which I've definitely used in my Jack West Jr. series, the Seven Ancient Wonders books, the Marvel movies make you stay to the end of the credits because there's a little uptick at the end of a Marvel movie that tells you what might be happening. Remember the spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Avengers Infinity War, if you're the 3 people who haven't, at the end of the credits, you've got Samuel L. Jackson standing on the street. He's got his beeper, and it's got the Captain Marvel symbol on it before he fades to dust. That is what I call an uptick. You've just watched this great movie, and then at the end of the credits, Marvel is saying to you, but wait, there's more. And I am writing, yes, for that audience. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that tells me that there's you're doing a tremendous lot of research, just keeping pace with, let's call it, trends.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get into speeches, and I'm always about trying to understand my audience before I get them to talk, because there's no point me talking to them today what I talked to them about 10 years ago.
Yes.
And so, but you're doing this on scale. Yours is massive scale. How the hell did you got a team behind you who's keeping up, coming and saying, "Hey, Matt, we know we've been reading this or watching that"?
Nope. No. I think I'll be getting into that with Netflix in the coming months, because they do that.
Right.
My market research is a book signing. You go and do a book signing at a shopping mall in Canberra, where you get a line of people waiting 2 hours to get their book signed. You see men and women. Most of my readers, I would say, are over 20. You do get teenagers, but there's not a lot. I'd say more than 50% of women, because women read more than men. And a lot of people who don't read Matthew Reilly books go, oh, they're boys' books, they're lots of, guns and ammo. But the female characters have always been strong. Not just the Marines from the Ice Station Scarecrow series or the women in the Jack West series, but books like The Tournament, about a young Queen Elizabeth when she was Princess Bess, traveling to a chess tournament. In terms of a team, this is my team, me sitting here in my office. But what I think we'll find out, let me rephrase. You asked about, how do I discover the trends? Who do I talk to? For Interceptor, I spoke with my good friend Stuart Beattie, who's possibly the most successful Australian filmmaker that Australia hasn't heard about. He wrote the first Pirates of the Caribbean and the Tom Cruise movie Collateral. He was my co-writer and producer on Interceptor. And we talked about Interceptor because my first draft, I got into the action super fast. The story begins, these bad guys steal 16 Russian missiles and they're going to fire them at America, and our heroine has to shoot them down from Interceptor base. And Stu said to me, Matt, this was before Netflix came on board. He said, when somebody buys their ticket, they're going to give you 10 minutes to settle into the movie because they're sitting in the cinema, they've bought their popcorn, they're not going anywhere. Netflix comes along, wants to make the movie. We shot the movie, we cut the movie. I kept it fast anyway. Netflix know that when you're watching at home, people do turn off the movie in the first 10 minutes. The first 10 minutes of a Netflix movie has to grab you by the throat, like the first page of a novel, because people at home can turn it off. And Stu, to his credit, said to me recently, he said, yeah, you were right. The movies have changed. You don't have 10 minutes. You have 2 minutes to grab them. Otherwise, they'll go off and watch something else. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's sort of my behaviour, to be frank with you. I'm on Netflix. And I've got some, when you go on and you see all the various lines and it says continue watching. I've got so many continue watchings after about 3-4 minutes.
Yep.
I just, forget it. Yep. It's not my go, or it hasn't got me in. And whereas the ones that get me in the beginning, I do watch to the end, generally speaking. So did you write that your last book, or I don't know if it's your last book, but The Interceptor, for Netflix in particular? I mean, was that your goal?
No. So Interceptor, to give you the full frame of reference for Interceptor was an original screenplay that I wrote. My books weren't getting made because they cost $100 million to make, and I wanted to direct. Right. So I wrote Interceptor. It's got these massive high stakes, bad guys firing 16 stolen nukes at America. But most of the action takes place at this Interceptor missile facility, which is based on a real facility. And this is real. It takes 24 minutes for a missile to fly from Russia to the United States, a nuclear missile. You have half that time, 12 minutes, to shoot it down. And so our heroine turns up for work on the worst day of her life, and bad guys shoot everybody else, and she barricades herself in the command center. Now, in my movie, that takes place, in my original script, that took place on about page 5. And we altered the script and it took place on about page 7 or 8. Now in the movie, it takes place about 4 minutes in. Really, really fast. Now, to answer your question, no, when I first wrote Interceptor, the idea was to sell it to a studio or a mini studio and release it in cinemas. When Elsa Pataky read the script and got on board, her husband is Chris Hemsworth, and he did a deal with Netflix. Extraction was the first film for that. And so Netflix came into the picture. And, hey, I was a first-time director. I would have made it for anybody. So, Netflix, Fox, Lionsgate, I didn't care. If someone was going to give me money to make it, Netflix, I didn't care.
It's pretty exciting. I just was wondering as we were talking then about a young Matthew, like real young. I mean, when you're a kid, what were you like? 10, 11, 12. You're born and bred in Canberra?
Sydney. Sydney.
Yep. So you're a Sydney guy.
Yep.
What was your deal? Like, explain to me.
I watched like The Empire Strikes Back every afternoon for 3 months before Return of the Jedi came out. I was fully into Star Wars. I had my action figures and I would build movie sets of Jabba the Hutt's palace with Jabba the Hutt sitting there and Luke Skywalker in front of him. I had a little trap door in the little set that I built with a string on it, and I'd pull the trap door open so Luke would drop through the trap door like he did in the movie. My parents, if they bought something which came in a box, they just gave me the box and I could, keep myself amused all weekend, building little movie sets, building little spaceships. I loved it. I would watch the making of movies and enjoy the magic of it. Return of the Jedi. You might remember the sail barge scene where, Luke's made to walk the plank above this desert creature. And I remember seeing the set for that, of the sail barge, and behind it was all wooden planks and struts, like one of those old Wild West towns from a John Wayne movie. That's what I was like when I was 10. I remember when I was 12, I saw Aliens, which is probably not a good idea. Probably for parents to send a 12-year-old to watch Aliens.
But when you say you saw the movie sets, how'd you get access to that sort of stuff?
No, I was watching making of specials. They're on television back then. At like 10 o'clock at night, you'd see in the TV guide, back when there was a TV guide and 4 stations, it would say the making of Return of the Jedi or the making of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and I would just eat those things up.
You must have been a dream kid because most kids are out stealing something from the shop or whatever when I grew up, or down the road, or trying to break open one of those things that dispense cans of drink or chocolates and things like that. But you're there sort of burrowing away in some back room of your home. I can sort of imagine it. Yeah. Your imagination must be wild. I mean, your parents must. Did your parents encourage it? Like, I was just trying to think of it. None of my boys were like, they have 4 sons. None of them were like that. And I just wonder how I would have dealt with it if I had seen them sitting there in the corner, and I thought, well, why aren't they going outside to play with the other kids? Or would I have gone, that's cool, go and keep doing it. My brother was a bit like that with Lego when I grew up as a kid. My brother would sit in the room for 6 hours playing Lego. I had no time for it, but my parents were pretty cool with that. So what were your parents like with you?
I was probably a bit like that with the cardboard boxes and your brother with the Lego. Full disclosure, I had an older brother, 18 months older. We'd go up to the park and play touch football with the other neighbourhood kids. At school, I was a good cricketer and a good soccer player, so I was in the school cricket team and the school soccer team. I had a good outlet for my energy, and I was a good student too. And I worked at it, and I've always worked at it. And I would study, and once I got to high school, I went to a Jesuit boys' high school, St. Aloysius College, and I had other students say to me, why do you study? Why do you try so hard? And I was like, when school's over, I'm not going to see you again. Why should I ever, restrain myself and not do my best? Why? Because I make you look bad? And so I studied and did my best. And creatively, my parents, my mother still is a huge reader of fiction. There was always fiction lying around the house. My dad and my mum went in local amateur musicals, and they took me. I still remember. They took me to the opening. We saw Raiders of the Lost Ark at a movie cinema, and we saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom on the first night.
At the cinema?
We went to opening night to see the second Indiana Jones movie, and so you could definitely say my parents were encouraging me. We weren't going to see Shakespeare in the park. We were going to see Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So real pop culture fans, my parents.
I think a lot of people might label you, they have this imagination. I have this imagination of you sitting there, you've got your laptop, and you're ripping in, and you're just like digging in all day, all night, just typing away at 1,000 miles an hour, massive pace, your brain dumping stuff onto the screen. And you might have described you as a nerd. But now that's why I sort of dug in a little bit into the weeds. What were you like at school? You weren't a nerd. You were just doing what everyone else did. You probably tried a bit harder, perhaps, you studied, did your work at Allo's, which, by the way, my brother's kids went to. Uh-huh. You didn't lock yourself away, but you had this itch, this sort of imaginary creative itch.
Yes. And, I have transcended nerddom. I've gone beyond that. Once you have a DeLorean and a Han Solo in carbonite and, the idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark sitting behind you, be careful with the nerds, because the nerds are the ones who end up earning millions of dollars and living the dream. I think the funny thing about that, my time in high school, there was activity, there was cricket and soccer and local touch football. It's a hackneyed term, but it was well-rounded. And it's. I mean, let's be honest. People ask me all the time, how do you get into the movie business? How do you get a book published? Everybody finds their own way. I self-published my first book because it got rejected by everybody. It was a long shot of long shots, but that's how I got in. Other people know somebody. But yeah, that time in high school is pivotal. And I remember I did debating at high school, and I used to do speeches at schools, and I remember I'd ask students at schools, I'd say, put your hand up if you're doing debating, and feel it, there's be a snickering, a wave of snickering go through the audience, and a couple of kids put their hands up bravely, meekly, and I would say, okay, everybody, all those kids who put their hands up, they're starting the game of life 100 meters ahead of the rest of you, because they will be able to speak in public. And I did a book tour early on in my career to England. I went on the Big Breakfast TV show. 4 million people watching this show live. You want to be able to speak in public. And I always liked to think after I left those schools that enrollments in debating went up. But yeah, I copped grief as well for that. People say, why do you do debating? Yeah, well.
You just mentioned grief. I guess I'd like to just touch on this if you don't mind. You did suffer some grief many years ago, probably 10 years ago, but this year I'd say.
10 years ago, yep.
And your, at that time, beloved wife passed away. How do you deal with grief when you're trying to keep your imagination alive and write books that are going to be hopefully put into movie one day?
Well, I stopped. I did pause. I literally couldn't be bothered writing anything at that time. I was overwhelmed with grief. I cried every day for 6 months. I didn't write a word for a year. With grief, well, I guess, following on from what I said before, I was suggested a few books to read about it. And you learn that there are several excellent books on grief. One is called On Grief and Grieving. C.S. Lewis wrote A Grief Observed. And there's one about men grieving. It's called something like Swallowed by a Snake. And it's how men specifically grieve. They look for projects and tasks. And In the end, I was lucky. I mean, I've been very well paid for what I do. And so I was able to step out of the world, financially for a year. There was no pressure, of course, from my publishers to write anything. And the first thing that I did decide to write about a year later was The Great Zoo of China, which is quite possibly the most cartoonish of all of my books. It's Jurassic Park with dragons in China. And it's pure escapism. I wasn't looking to write anything deep or overly complex. And that was sort of the trainer wheels book I needed to get back into it. Everybody has their struggles and things that they go through in life, and that was certainly one of mine. And the thing that came out of it, still comes out of it for me to this day, is I was fortunate to have the life I had with my late wife, and I also now don't sweat the small stuff. I see people complain about things, and I'm like, yeah, that's not really a big issue. There are bigger things to complain about. I play golf. I see guys get angry on the golf course. Why? It's not worth it. And when I see people complain about things, I say, the world can be a much harder place. And if anything, it's helped me with Hollywood too, because Hollywood is a pretty ruthless environment, and I just don't care. I said to somebody on my movie, I said, listen, just tell me how it is. You can't hurt my feelings. You can't offend me. And, there's nothing on a movie set. It's a high-pressure environment. You're moving quickly. You're making big decisions, yes. But nothing is bigger than life. Life is the only thing that matters, the life of those we love. And so, yeah, I'm perfectly placed to deal with these Hollywood assholes because, doesn't make any difference to me.
Oh my God, I got to get into the Hollywood bit. I don't know anyone. Well, I when I did a TV show many years ago, like a reality show, I dealt with a couple of TV people, and I always found them quite intriguing as individuals. Pretty hard work, I found, which is one of the reasons I stopped doing the reality show.
It is.
What's it really like in Hollywood? Like, tell me. Like, I became quite friends with David Hasselhoff, good friends, before he came on my show. That is, and I went over there a few times because I had a girl that I used to take out from LA, and I used to, in those days I worked for General Electric, and I used to fly to New York once a month. I used to fly to Stanford in Connecticut once a month, and on the way I stop in LA, and I'd hang out with her for a few days and hang out with her on the way back. So I got to know him because she was friends of him. That's how I got to know him. But he's a good guy. But my God, like it's talk about pace. That's a mad pace. How do you not put up with this? I don't want him to listen to this. I don't want him to think I had to put up with him. But how do you deal with all the personalities, strong personalities, egos? Is it really like that in Hollywood?
Oh my God, where to start?
Give me something.
Well, so I fired my agents a few years ago. I was with WME, William Morris Endeavour, and I was baffled by what motivated agents. At one point they used to work great for me. They sent my stuff out, and then they just sort of didn't. And I said to myself, what motivates an agent? And I realized that all agents in Hollywood, they just want to send their kids to the same school as Steven Spielberg and maybe be on the PTA with Spielberg or his wife, Kate Capshaw. That's it. That is not a joke. That's exactly what they want. They literally want to hang out with Spielberg on a Friday or Saturday watching school sport. Somebody once said everybody in Hollywood is, they're looking for, they're always looking for something better. So if they're dating you, they're really actually looking for someone better. And it's the same sometimes with movies, that they're looking for, a lead actor, and they might get a lead actor, but if Leonardo DiCaprio says yes, well, we'll ditch everybody else and we'll get Leo. And what I find, and this has been my thing in life, you make a decision and you stick with it. And the actors and talent I got for Interceptor were extraordinary. Elsa Pataky is amazing. An Australian actor named Luke Bracey played my villain. and he's going to be a superstar. A guy who played one of the minor roles, Aaron Glenane, is extraordinarily talented. He was so good that the crew formed a line for him on his last day as he left the set. And
wow,
that was, I heard stories on my set of, directors being just awful human beings. And there's no reason for that, but that definitely happens in Hollywood. You get people who throw their weight around. I've had people make comments on the movie and they expect their comments to be affected and done. What they don't realize with me is that I don't care. I honestly don't care for their alleged status.
Did you stay faithful in the directing of the movie, faithful to everything you had written prior to this, or do you have to make some adjustments in the movie?
You got to make adjustments. Even in pre-production, They said, listen, we can't afford this scene. We had a fight on a helipad. They said, we can't afford to build the helipad. You have to do the fight somewhere else. And I said, okay. And so that's the joy of being a writer and a director. You can rewrite it. Oh, yeah, you've got to roll with the punches, but all I needed was the chance to direct one movie and do it well. And as all through Interceptor, all I needed to do was do this movie really well. Because directing is so hard, and it's so hard to get that first chance, that if I could do this well, they'd let me do it again. And Netflix have already audience tested the movie, and it tested really, really well, so they gave us more money to make the effects better. So I think my chances of doing it again, fingers crossed, are good. But so yeah, I had to roll with the punches and get it made. At the risk of rambling, the most stressful period was the last 4 days, because we'd been shooting for over a month and you've got your schedule set, and I had all these major fights to be fought in the last 4 days. And if the weather changed or if we got behind, I wasn't going to finish them. And I had no more time. And I was literally winding them up on the set going, move, move, move. We got to go, go, go. We got to get this done. Because you can't cut together half a movie. Or you need those finishing fights. So that was where it got stressful.
I don't want to ask you the awkward question, but I mean, I guess it is. Like
you can.
They give you a budget, I presume. Netflix say, well, hey, Matt, this is all we're going to spend, blah. Who sits down and how do you work out how you spread that budget across the whole show, the whole movie?
So you I'm the director and the writer. So the director is sort of the creative controller of the story. Your producers are the ones who map out the budget, and they also bring in the first assistant director. And the first assistant director should have a better name because they do much more than that. They are not your assistant. They do the schedule. I had a wonderful guy named Bob Donaldson who's been working for years. He gets the budget, he does the schedule, and so you have this narrowing timeline of days running out, money running out, and you want them to hit right on the last. I mean, we shot this in April and May, and now here I am in December. The shoot is this manic, exciting, really fun period. Our biggest budget item is visual effects, computer graphics. I've got nuclear missiles being intercepted in the sky, which I've never seen in a movie before. And again, I'm still working on those as we speak. I've got a meeting this afternoon online to do them. So we're still actually, the days are running out till I deliver in February, and the money's running out too. And hopefully, boom, right on that last day, get zero. My producer said to me, don't leave any money in the bank. We've got this budget. Spend it all to the last day.
So I got to ask you this question because I reckon this would be cool. In terms of choosing the talent, I guess you have someone who does that, but I mean, you must have some say in it or at least participation in it. Elsa Pataky being Chris Hemsworth's partner in life. Did you try and choose Australians or people with Australian links if you could?
All of our cast were Australian. No, the script obviously goes to actresses, some in Hollywood, some in England, and the script found its way to Mark Bouris, Elsa and Chris's Australian manager. And he turned out to be a fan of my books. So he sees Matthew Reilly, script by Matthew Reilly, and he's directing it. And again, brings us full circle to bonkers, fast, crazy action. And he knew that Elsa wanted to get back into movies and do an action movie. And she wanted to do something for her daughter to see that women could do action. And here's me with this story, which is basically Die Hard with a woman with Interceptor missiles in it. And so when Elsa wanted to do it, again, I was stoked. And between us, she looks ripped. She hit the gym. She looks like Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2 in this movie. You want to see someone do pull-ups, oh my God. For the villain, for Luke Bracey, he was one of 3 actors that Netflix asked us to look at. So I looked at him and 2 others, and he was phenomenal. Turned out he'd also read my books when he was younger. So the books help in a big way. And for the other roles, you'd be amazed. You get sent audition tapes. They're reading the lines from the script. And very often the best candidate just leapt out straight away. You could see the ones who got it, and they sort of, they won the role fair and square. But you might watch 25, 30 tapes for those, maybe more.
I reckon you're going to get a whole heap of agents in Hollywood now coming along to you, hoping that they're going to be at your kids' school soccer on a Saturday afternoon, a bit like you talked about Spielberg before. You're going to get a flood of agents coming towards you, say, what's next, Matt? What's next, Matt? By the way, it was all filmed.
We filmed it in Sydney. We filmed it in Artarmon.
You filmed in Sydney.
In the sound stages at the old ABC studios. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
George Miller was in there before. George Miller moved out and we moved in. So, yeah.
What was George doing there?
He was doing 3,000 Years of Longing, which he's finishing that now before he does Furiosa.
Oh, cool. He's my neighbour. He's a really cool guy. He's a really good guy.
He is an amazing guy. And he was a guy, he was an influence on me. The Mad Max films, especially not so much the first one, which was amazing, but the second one, Mad Max 2, that was 30 years ahead of its time. He is stunning. And obviously went off and did Babe and Happy Feet, Witches of Eastwick, stuff like that. But that second Mad Max movie, that was, basically it's like the Lord of the Rings. It was the first and the best of its genre. He is stunningly good.
It's interesting. He's such a unassuming person. Like I've sometimes seen him down the shop or just at the fish shop in Rose Bay or something like that, buying fish from, we're both, his Greek background as I'm, we go to this same Greek fish shop down there in Rose Bay, the Costies, and they have a photograph of him up there on their wall, and he's just like a dude, like just a normal person. Like, I'm not saying he shouldn't be, nor should I say that you shouldn't be, but then I step back and I think, my God, like as you said, Mad Max, what an imagination this guy must have. And crazy.
The sheer originality of Mad Max 2 is mind-blowing. And what he did with Fury Road was basically did Mad Max 2, but he had, $180 million to do it. No, hey, if you see him around the neighborhood, tell him Matthew Reilly's a huge fan and owes him a debt of gratitude for the inspiration. I think when I was very young, when I self-published Contest, I sent a copy to his offices in where is he? He's in King's Cross near Maclay Street in that old Art Deco theatre. Never heard back from him, but if he ever wants to do any of the books, let him know. He's great.
There's a big controversy now, by the way, about that theatre at the moment in Potts Point or back at King's Cross. Yeah, some developers are trying to tear it down. In fact, I think I saw him up there talking about it, saying why it shouldn't be torn down. And I quickly wanted to ask you, is there a correlation, because you just said something about his budget, $180 million. Is there a correlation with how hectic a movie can turn out to be in your genre? Is there a direct correlation, or are you always juggling with this?
No, it's a good question. I think the more money involved, the more nervous the studio gets. So they really want to make sure someone like George Miller's got a history of, managing big budget movies. For my movie with a budget of less than $20 million, I get less interference from the studio because it's not going to break the bank if it fails. But if Mad Max Fury Road doesn't succeed, somebody at the studio, many people are going to get fired. So yeah, I met a filmmaker here who did a superhero movie 15 years ago, and he hated it, and now he makes $14 million movies because he doesn't get that nervous interference from the studio. So yeah, if you want to make big budget movies, and let's be honest, that's where I want to go next. You have to have your stuff together, and you say George is a very unassuming guy. So am I. Somebody described me recently. I look like a boyish accountant rather than a Hollywood movie director.
Well, you could have been a lawyer.
Could have been a lawyer, but maybe you need that organizational skill of the law degree to manage the hundreds of people and the money, and also tell a really fun and interesting story. And that's why I've got all this stuff around me, because in the end, you have to have all the organizational skills. You could have all the organizational skills in the world, but if you're not telling something fun, if you're not giving people joy, then they're going to turn off your show like you do after 3 minutes. It just reminded me too. One of the things that I think, George Miller is a great example of, and the nicest compliment I got after Interceptor, after the shoot, Chris and Elsa invited me to the Thor set. I'm going to do a big name drop here, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I get introduced to Matt Damon is on the set. Oh. And Matt Damon and his wife Lucy, they're very close with Chris and Elsa. And Lucy and Elsa are thick as thieves. And Matt Damon's there, and they introduced me to him. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Matt Damon. And they go, Matt, this is Matt Reilly. He directed Elsa's movie. And he immediately goes, no way. Elsa couldn't stop talking about that. She had so much fun making that movie. And that, if Matt Damon's out there telling his friends in Hollywood that if you work on a Matthew Reilly movie, you'll not only make something fun and entertaining, but you'll have a good time doing it. That's the reputation I want as a director. And I think you could say George Miller has that reputation. People, leap at the chance to work with him. That's what you want. That's the next step for me. And so again, he's a really good role model for me.
That having a vision of your own evolution is pretty cool. I want to go back to Interceptor. So, what date are we going to look forward to seeing this on Netflix? Because I'm going to be watching. When is it? Netflix
have said to me it's going to be around the start of April next year.
Start of April next year? Yeah. And what do you think? I mean, obviously you're getting rebooked for another show, another movie, or a follow-through. Can you give me something?
Yeah, no. I'm very keen to sort of set up the next one. So I had a chat with Netflix about a couple of other projects I've got, including a sequel to Interceptor. But what they do, and they did this, Warner Brothers did this with Dune recently, is they are still going to wait to see how Interceptor does. You're still confident as they might be, they still want to wait and see. So this is why, before we jumped on this call, I was tapping away on my next book, because I have to do something between now and April. I'm not going to sit in my hands and twiddle my thumbs. So I'm writing my next book. I got 3 scripts on my desk here ready to go. So if Interceptor pops, I'm ready to run.
And will Elsa Pataky pick up her iPhone or whatever it is at some stage right at the end, towards the end, and sort of fade away to a screen that sort of indicates to us, don't give too much away, I know you can't, but fade away, or will somebody, maybe not but Elsa, or the heroine, but will somebody fade away to a screen and sort of use that device you were talking about before that was shown? I can't remember. You've downloaded me with so much stuff, I can't remember what it was. Will that happen? Are you going to set us up for something else? I hope so.
The Marvel style uptick.
That's
in the credits.
Yep. Yeah.
Maybe.
Call it an uptick. Call it a setup. I love it.
I might have done something along those lines. And
I reckon you've watched a few sequels in your day, or I reckon you've watched a few setups or upticks for sequels in your day. It looks like everything you have been a student of has had a sequel and a sequel and a sequel and another sequel.
Yeah, that's a very good observation, yeah. Look at Spielberg. Yep. Spielberg directed all the Indiana Jones movies too. He directed the sequels. Right. Up until now, Jim Mangold's making the latest one. That little bit of Samuel L. Jackson at the end of Infinity War, showing him getting the beeper with the Captain Marvel symbol on it, made Disney $1 billion.
Wow.
The Captain Marvel movie came out a few months later. It is, I think it's fair to say, it's not regarded as one of the best Marvel movies made. It's adequate. It's very, very good. It's solid, but it's not the best. It made $1 billion at the box office. And then, you get all... That's worth, a 1 minute uptick at the end of your Infinity War credits.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm gonna have to wrap, but I'm gonna have to let you go too. But in the interest of time, but just one final question. You talked earlier about agents and all that sort of stuff, and I remember watching on, I think it was Netflix, a series called Ray Donovan, and Ray Donovan was a guy who's like a manager of Hollywood stars, and it gets a bit dark towards the end. I just couldn't keep my eyes off it. It was such a great series for me. It was a TV series.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing like what you're doing. Are there such people as Ray Donovans in Hollywood?
Yes. Yeah. There are fixers. I have met
fixers.
Hollywood fixers.
That's mad.
Yeah. And I think probably increasingly you're going to see fixers are actually people fixing social media faux pas or stuff like that. But yes, they do exist.
That's an interesting thing about the faux pas on digital socials and et cetera. That's probably right too. Matthew Reilly, I really enjoyed this conversation. Like, it's totally energized me. I want to congratulate you on what you've done. I'm super excited to watch your Netflix movie coming out in April next year, Interceptor. I'm really looking forward to it. And what's so cool is that it's a boy from Allos in Sydney who's made good in the biggest stage of the world. That's Hollywood. So well done, congratulations, and thanks for being Australian. Thanks for representing us so well, and I've had a ball talking to you.
Mate, I not only love making movies, but it's even more fun when you bring Netflix's American money and spend it in Australia on the best cruise in the world. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's been very enjoyable.
You're most welcome.